the cart before the horse, or should the cart be put behind the horse, grammatically speaking, that is. Today's program is about the writing and editing of books on solar events. Stay with us.
Welcome to The Better Part, a program by and for seniors and devoted to exploring the many facets of those better years of our lives. The name of our program was inspired by a quotation from Robert Browning. Grow old along with me, the best is yet to be, the last of life for which the first was made.
Joe, did I put the cart before the horse again this time?
It's a good first draft, Ernie. Now let's sit down and iron out the rough edges.
Some lighter moments to brighten your day.
Hello, I'm Val Jeffrey of The Better Part. If you've seen this photo on the cover or within a magazine, chances are you've seen the work of my guest today. Ernie Piini, Eclipse chaser extraordinaire, has documented 26 solar events with the help of his colleague and friend of 30 years. Joe Heim has been editing Ernie's work and has been his partner through most of his writings. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Nice to be here.
So Ernie, the cart before the horse, could you explain that?
Yeah, since I was writing the books, after about the third book in which Joe entered the picture, I had a habit of putting the predicate before the subject, you know, and he'd take my roughage and move the cart in the back of the horse where it belongs. So,
Yes, I had read Ernie's first two books, which were done before I met him, and was very interested in the way he was doing things and his hobbies, and I thought I could help him a little bit by rearranging his sentences, and he was always very gracious when I would submit a new version for him.
So Ernie, you're so dedicated to chasing all these eclipses and solar events. How did you go on your first one?
well, back in 1970, I was grinding a mirror, an 8-inch mirror at Foothill College, and there we were under supervision of Marv Van, who at that time was organizing a solar eclipse trip to Mexico, Mitla, Mexico. And I thought that was a great opportunity to join him. So for the next 5 months, we started putting equipment together. We built a comet searching camera using a fast lens. We built a lot of small telescopes so that people can attach their cameras to it and get their own pictures. We built a great big tracking mount that put 3 big telescopes on it and a movie camera. And I also built a meteorology station, which we measured all the temperatures, the wind velocities, and we got some great results. We had a time clock on it.
Well, tell me about the eclipse. Was it clear skies, Ernie?
Yes, in Mitla it was threatening rain a couple of days before, but on a day of the eclipse it was perfect. I was up on a mount with my own camera, and the big thing was shadow bands. That's that activity where it happens right there before totality or right after totality. And the ground looked like it was shaking. It was just so vibrant, and it really threw me. But I was really tickled to death to see that. The meteorology equipment worked great. I had Vern Doherty operate that station. All the photographs turned out great for being my first time. And the big thing about the eclipse was afterwards we got to deal with the locals, the Mexican people that came across the valley to look through our telescopes. And one night we had a star party, and they'd come and look. They'd form a line, long line, and they'd look through the telescope and and then they'd go to the back of the line, come through again.
Come through again.
And during the daytime, we had it set up so they can see their mission across the valley, and it was quite a sight.
So what about that? What got you hooked? Was it the interest of the people, or what made you want to go on all the ones you went on?
Well, you know, the eclipse only lasted about 3.5 minutes, and you never seem to get enough of it. So The next one was in Canada, northeast Canada, and we took a trailer across the country to Kapchat in Canada, northeast Canada, and
yeah. And then every time you come back, then you write
a book.
You document it. Yes. So who sponsored your books?
Delmo Victor Company, the company I worked for. Plus, we had the blessings from Textron, their parent company.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things where, after they saw my first pictures, they wanted a book printed. So we produced that book. And after that, they kept asking me, "Are you going to publish another book?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, if you want." And
yeah.
so that's what happened. Every time they were waiting for another book to come out.
So, Joe, how did you get involved, and when did you get involved in helping Ernie edit?
Well, I started with the third book on the eclipse over the Sahara, and Ernie was always very good about bringing home all of these beautiful pictures of the sun and the moon eclipsed, and travel pictures of where he had been. And we both belonged to the Delmo Victor Management Company, and he would put on an hour show for the management club at one time during the year, or more often as it turned out, because he made so many trips. He did many of these slideshows, and so everybody received them very well. And he got a lot of cooperation from the other employees.
Right.
He could ask anybody to do something. They'd draw a picture for him and add graphics to his books. And so it was a great collaboration. Yeah.
So you were very lucky to find Joe.
Oh,
and
yes.
I seem to think that you, what did you refer to him as? Your guardian angel, or what was it?
He claims he was my guardian angel.
Yes.
Oh, I was.
I think so. To have someone come along that can look at it objectively
yeah.
and make it better.
He was a
Yes.
blessing.
Yeah, yeah. So Joe, you were an editor before, or you weren't? Had you done any editing before you got involved in this?
Not really. I hadn't done very much, but I did for a couple of years do the editor of the monthly Management Club magazine. And so I was always interested then in writing, and I wanted to do as good a job as I could for Ernie's writing, so I started taking some courses in writing, and did mostly technical writing throughout my career. And the management magazine, The Matrix, Ernie would supply pictures for that of the various people, and that was well received. And then after I gave that up, Ernie took over and was editor of it for a couple more years, I think.
Yeah, we got to pick out the prettiest girl and call her Miss Matrix every month, you know. So we were popular guys.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
bet you were.
And I was able to go along when he shot these pictures of the pretty girls, so that was nice. But we became less sexist later. We include the management people for achievement as well as for their
We're
good
going to
looks.
keep the funds coming.
As usual, you tend to go a little too far, you know, and you get in trouble.
Yes.
You know, the president of the company calls you up.
With praise, I hope, Ernie.
Yeah, sometimes.
Most of the time.
So, Joe, were you ever worried about changing the wording so that you changed the inference of what Ernie was saying? How did you cope with that?
Well, that was my main problem, I think, or concern as I did his work. I would always keep a copy of his original writing, so if I thought I changed it too drastically, I'd go back and check it, and then I would pass it by Ernie, and he was always very gracious and accepted a lot of my changes, even if they were very drastic. And then I was able to point out some terms that maybe he needed to define a little better, or add something to improve the content.
Well, I'm very interested in your visit to Stonehenge in England, because
yes.
I've been there too, and you and I both were able to walk around it before they fenced it off, and you really feel like you're with the ancients. And tell me about that.
That's the important thing, to be able to go up there and touch those age-old stones, you know, over 5,000 years old. And the second time I went there, of course, they had the ropes around so you couldn't get in. But it was fascinating, and I knew the history of Stonehenge from some of the books that were out. And that's where I found out that up in Maryhill in the state of Washington, there's a replica of Stonehenge. It was built by Sam Hill. Who in Sam Hill is Sam Hill. And there, Jim Kuzbaugh and I went out one day and ran all the alignments with our astronomical equipment. And after that, I was able to write a book.
Okay, and you did a booklet, America's Stonehenge.
Right, and this is the one that Joe and I went professional on. We each put in a couple of $1,000 apiece, and of course the next day Joe goes and writes a check for his new car.
And Ernie had done a very good job of making a model of the Stonehenge in England, and he donated it eventually to the museum up there in Washington, and I think it's still there today.
Right.
And eventually the graph of all of the calculations that Ernie made from the book was printed on a plate and mounted right near the monument. So you can go up there and see Ernie's plaque out there with his name on it, and you can buy the book still at the museum.
Wow.
We went into a Sarsen Press, we called ourselves, for publishing that. I had great expectations of selling thousands of copies around the country.
But that is no more.
But we weren't able to do that. The marketing was a very tough job. But we eventually sold most of them through the Maryhill Museum, and we eventually gave them the rights to republish when we no longer felt up to keep republishing ourselves.
Well,
So-
we went the full route. We got an ISBN number from Washington, and copyright, everything.
Wow.
I had gone to San Francisco State Extension and took a couple of years of publishing courses to try to do that, but that was our one and only shot at it, other than publishing all of these,
Right.
which it did help
Right.
knowing how to do that.
Well, one of the, this is the one I like, it's Eclipse over Siberia. And it seems that this was a time, which year was it, Ernie?
1980, 81.
81?
Yeah,
81.
That's
yeah.
a time when people weren't going to Siberia.
right. It was still communist.
So tell us about that trip. That's very
Well,
interesting.
Brezhnev was the president at that time, but it was interesting. What I did was read all about Peter the Great and Catherine the Great before I went over there, so I knew a lot of the history. And it was fascinating to go into like Moscow and Red Square and see all these little churches inside the gate there. I was really impressed. And of course we flew out to Siberia to see the eclipse.
Yeah.
And the country's beautiful. People were great. One of the side trips was out to Samarkand in Uzbekistan. And there we got to see Ulugh-Beg's observatory, which is just a quadrant, part of the quadrant. It's still in the ground. And I did a study on that, and Joe and I took that information and we entered it into a contest down there at Griffith Observatory, and we won first place on that one.
Wow.
Yeah, Ernie had published it locally as a pamphlet, and then when he became aware the Griffith Observatory had this annual contest, he submitted it to them and took first place that
Yeah,
year.
we have that. We have that here too.
Right.
Griffin Observer.
And
Okay.
my artist at Delma Victor made up the observatory like we thought it would look
Yeah.
like.
Right.
And I indicated how they built the place, you know, and I got reports from people from around the world indicating it was an amazing write-up.
Yeah.
So I felt quite proud about that.
What's this instrument?
This is the top instrument that used to measure elevation and declination of stars, and the other part, the centerfold, shows a picture of the transit. Here, how it was used. It's a quadrant, and two helpers and an astronomer would move this plate up and down, and they'd wait for the sun to cross the meridian at noontime, and they would adjust their template so that they can get the exact declination of the sun. They use it for some of the stars, but it was mostly for the sun and the moon. When the moon crossed the meridian, they knew exactly the altitude or the declination.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Arabs had done a lot of work with building these huge observatories and calculating, making the astronomical tables of when stars would appear various places.
Right.
They could predict eclipses, I'm sure, and they kept that science alive during the European
Yeah.
Dark
Now,
Ages.
I noticed in the books sometimes there are poems, and I wanted to read one. Okay. Each time I stand to watch the moon obscure the sun in afternoon, I wonder at the awful fright when first mankind beheld this sight. The world grows dark, the birds are still, the ancients feel an earthly chill, but now we know precisely when the ghostly beauty's ours again. And that's by May Kuhn.
Yes.
Tell us about May.
I met May in late 1980, and we became good friends and traveling companions, eventually traveling around the United States and Canada by car. But she was quite a grammarian, and she eventually started editing my work for copy editing purposes. And if I made a mistake with a phrase or a comma or something, she would help me correct that. And I found out she had this interest in poetry. So I mentioned it to Ernie, and of course Ernie, first thing he did was ask May to write a poem for his books. And over the years, every time he'd come back, he'd ask her again, and it challenged her, and she eventually would come up with a poem for several of his books.
Yeah.
And she was able to go with us in 1991 when I could make my first Eclipse trip, because I had never seen one before, when we went to Cabo San Lucas and watched the 1991 eclipse, which was a great experience. Yeah.
Yes, I was actually down there at that time.
Oh.
I didn't know it was going on, didn't know Ernie was down there, but all the locals were running around offering to give you glasses so that you could, you know, watch it. It was great.
It was a hot and dry time, as I recall.
I know.
And, but it was a very long eclipse, and when the eclipse occurred and the temperature dropped, it felt very good. I know.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But you've been to eclipses all over the world, haven't you? Another one that I like was this eclipse over Java. And I was taken by the front cover here.
Cholera, yeah.
Yes.
The-
This is an ancient Indonesian myth,
Right,
right?
right. And supposedly they had chopped off this body, and all that remained was this head that's going around in the heavens, seeking out the sun or the moon. And every time he caught the sun, it would cause a solar eclipse. Or if he caught the moon, it'd be a total lunar eclipse.
Right.
And every place you went, they had a picture of cholera. The magazines had cholera. Beer cans had picture of cholera on it. So they went all out on that eclipse.
Yeah. Now this was a long eclipse, and was the weather good?
This was a 4-minute eclipse.
A 4-minute, okay.
The weather was scary up till the day before. It was raining, thunderstorms, everything. And then the day of the eclipse, it was perfect.
Was that to do with the volcano or the dragon misbehaving?
Well, you know, we had that volcano right next to us, Mount Merapi, and that erupted the day of the eclipse, and you can see the smoke going up.
Oh.
And another nice thing about that eclipse was we had Janet Guthrie, the first lady to race the Indy 500. She was with us.
Yes.
And we were in a restaurant in Jakarta the night I met her, and we were passing around names, and when I heard her name was Janet Guthrie, I says, "You didn't by any chance run the Indy 500? She says, "Oh yeah." She pulls out her card with the wings on the rotor, on the
and you
wheel.
have a picture of that, and she signed it to you.
Right,
That's
right.
really special.
Right.
Yes. Did going to the eclipse in Baja did it change your outlook on the editing when you were editing the books?
I had a little better idea of the experiments that Ernie was doing there about measuring the temperature and the humidity as the eclipse occurred, and got to see the preparation time it took him to put things together. He was very good for months in advance of an eclipse of calculating what he needed in the way of equipment and building it in his garage if he had to, or sometimes he'd get help at Granada, at Delmo Victor. And his equipment was always ready when he got there.
Yeah.
And
This eclipse was one of the longer eclipses. How long do eclipses usually last?
They can last anywhere from a second up to 7.5 minutes.
All these books, Joe, is there one that sticks out in your mind? Do you have a favorite or not?
well, my favorite is also that Siberian eclipse. It was one of the first ones that I put most of the effort into. The second one was the eclipse Paragonov Peninsula. It's way on the right there. We were able to reproduce that one on my computer at home completely, and it was the only one that we made that we produced colored photos.
Yeah.
We put in 6 pages of colored photos, and I used
so
up
you've been there right from the beginning when they were typed out,
Yes.
right the way through to these beautiful color photos.
Yes, yes.
And when you're producing over 1,000 books, you know, it's a lot of copying, a lot of ink.
But of course, this is the better part, and you're a member of the team of the better part, and you carried on writing about your trips through the medium of television. Both Marilyn Priel was your host, and
you.
and I've done a few with you too.
Right, right.
And I got to meet your family, and it was really, really good. Tell our audience some of the shows that you've done.
Well, the first one I think I did with Marilyn was the eclipse over Mongolia, and that's where we had the coldest temperature of my experiences, and that was at minus 17 degrees below zero.
What does that do to the equipment?
Well, I had made up blankets, oven blankets, to put around the camcorder and stuff like that, and it kept it nice and warm. So, and luckily, even though it was snowing, at the moment of totality, the sky sort of opened up a little, and we can see all the action taking place. Not a perfect eclipse, but we got to see something.
Do you have a favorite TV program or not?
Well, I think the last one we did with you on Egypt was probably the best.
Yeah.
Because it had so much to talk about, you know,
Yeah.
and such pretty pictures.
Yeah.
Although I had problems with my equipment for once, but
Right. You also had problems with your hip, was why you didn't go the first time.
right, I was supposed to go to this Transit of Venus back 2005, and I threw my hip out and had to cancel that one.
But finally you did the trip
Right.
with your daughter Elaine, and she carried all your equipment.
Right, and a better time because it wasn't
Well, there
so
you go.
hot. Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah. What about the books? Do you have a favorite book?
I would say, well, they're all favorites, but I would have to say, you know, the Eclipse over Sahara has a lot of diagrams in it of the equipment I developed, the double clutch system that produced a three camera telescope, because I had so much time in Africa, you know, 7 minutes, so I could rotate this switch to bring in 3 different cameras, you know, and do different experiments. And I developed a spot filter, which eventually got me some great photos, like down here. And that's where I started, turned a heart shape and formed the right density to put up against the sun to allow the coronal streamers to show up beautifully, like this here. You see the streamers there.
Beautiful.
And it took me about 10 years to perfect that filter, but it started here. And what's nice about these other books is that anytime I developed something new, I was able to get it diagrammed correctly and printed up, and it added a lot to the story.
Yeah.
Each book contained a little description of what the country was like, and I also put in a couple of pages of the expeditioners and said a little about what they did, you know, whether they're teacher or preacher or what have you. And then at the end I would put in what's coming up, the next eclipse, you know, future eclipses, and even talked about the coming of Comet Halley. So it was a good reference book. It was.
But I do know what your favorite photo is. So
right.
We'll show to end what we started with.
Good.
Tell
good.
me about this photo.
Okay, this was on Friday the 13th. I was in Phoenix, Arizona. I was down there for a project, and I got up early in the morning to catch this sunrise eclipse. I had some homemade telescopes and trackers. And amazing thing is, I submitted a series of these photographs to Sky and Telescope, And if I had just submitted one, I would have had the cover page of a Sky and Telescope. But instead they printed the whole series, and it's in one of the other books. But it was used all over the place. And even though I've been to 26 eclipses, I haven't counted this one because it's only a partial eclipse. And it turned out one of the best photographs.
Yeah.
But it was on this magazine here, and this one, and also the
Oh, a calendar.
calendar.
Yes.
Yeah,
Tell me
November.
about the calendar.
November
Let's see that.
part of the calendar. This is one where the sun was up a little higher, but you can see the cactus from Arizona.
Yeah.
But they used it for advertisement.
Yeah.
In the centerfold, there's a strip of famous pictures, and this one's in there,
Yeah.
or this one's in
Yeah.
there.
Well, I could sit and talk to you forever and ever. We haven't even touched the surface of all the work that goes into it.
Right.
But we do have to close. So I want to thank you both for coming. And you must be really, really proud of the work you've done together.
I believe
Joe,
so.
your editing angel, or whatever it was called.
I called him something.
Yes. And you, Ernie, part of the Better Part group. I really respect your work. I value your friendship. And I'm glad you both came today.
Well,
Thanks
thank
for
you.
coming
It's
to
been
the
Thank
Better
you for the
Part.
kind words.
Great.
Time is T-minus 45 seconds. 40 seconds. T-minus 35 seconds. 30 seconds. T-minus 25 seconds. 20 seconds. T-minus 15 seconds. 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have the telephone.
Oh, wow, look, look. Oh, God, that was beautiful.
Nice promenade at 4 o'clock.
What's next, Ernie?
Well, there's a great total solar eclipse in Russia in the year 2009 during the month of July. And Val and her husband are planning to come with us. You want to join us?
Sure, let's go.
That's our program for today. We hope that you've enjoyed it and will join us again. Copies of this program and all our programs, including Ernie's Eclipse programs, are available on VHS or DVD. We can be reached through the Cupertino Senior Center at 408-777-3150, or you can visit our website, www.thebetterpart.com. Thank you for watching.